Let's get you more now on those developments there in the Middle East following the US's attack on Iran nuclear sites. SABC News correspondent Trent Murray is in Tel Aviv and joins us now for a live update. So Trent, how are neighboring countries reacting to this conflict?
Well, I think right now both Israel and many countries are in the region are on high alert, awaiting to see what Iran's response may be to all of this. At around 7 a.m. local time here a few hours ago, we saw what may have been the first part of their retaliation, around 30 ballistic missiles being fired here at Tel Aviv and also at Haifa, the country's third largest city in the far north. Now, we are being told that the air defense system was able to intercept a number of them, but we have seen some pretty significant damage on the ground with several apartment blocks and homes taking a hit. We are being told about 86 people have been injured. Right now, the shelter-in-place signal has been lifted. People are allowed to once again go out, but the state of emergency is still at its highest level now. Workplaces, schools are closed, and people are being told to remain close to their shelter throughout the day. I think other regions in the country will be watching this as well, particularly some of those Gulf states like Qatar and Bahrain, where some of the 40,000 US troops are stationed at overseas US bases. I think the question is, will Iran potentially look to target some of those bases now and directly try and hit American assets in response to all of this? So, I mean, undoubtedly now we've sort of crossed the Rubicon of a new serious escalation with the president's actions, and I don't think anybody quite knows yet just where this will lead, particularly in terms of Iran's response.
And clearly what's playing out, many have described as a vicious cycle of violence. And Trent, could this conflict spill over into a wider regional war? I mean, looking at developments with the US, does this not mean it's entering the war or declaring a war on Iran? And what's even baffling now is, how can one nation call for peace after striking another?
Well, I think right now that the Iranian position has been significantly weakened after around 10 days of attacks by the Israelis. They are now saying they have complete air dominance over most of Iran. In other words, they've destroyed much of Iran's air defense systems. We've seen some video in the past hour of them shooting yet more of Iran's Air Force jets that were parked on the tarmac at Air Force bases. And they also say that they are finding and hunting down the missile launchers which are being used to fire off these salvos of missiles. So I think in some ways Iran is in a challenging position right now in terms of what options it has. It could look, as I say, to potentially target US bases abroad. It could potentially look at closing the Strait of Hormuz and mine it with deep sea mines. Of course, that is a critical piece of seaway used to get oil out to the world from not just Iranian waters, but also those neighboring Gulf states. And so right now, I think it's difficult to see what they will do, but they are certainly vowing response. And so I think also what we have to look at is how some of the other neighboring countries may respond if Iran looks to go sort of on a significant retaliation phase here. And you know, we're making estimates here, but, you know, are oil facilities in, say, Saudi Arabia or Qatar safe, or are they going to be targeted in retaliation? We just don't know. They do have some options still, which could cause significant disruption and the right of risk of war in this region.
And at this stage, questions are also arising on where the UN is in all of this. Is this not a violation of international law? And how is this unilateral strike not considered a declaration of war? And what was the imminent threat to the US? And those are some of the questions that continue to arise at this moment. Would you agree?
Well, I think in many ways the debate over international law and the difference between a preemptive strike and an immediate danger, I mean, I think I'll leave that to the legal experts because I'm not a lawyer, but I know that certainly Iran is saying that they believe that this is a complete breach of international law. The Israeli response to that is they felt that they were in immediate danger and that they had intelligence suggesting Iran was very close to building a nuclear weapon. Obviously, the US has followed that same intelligence, which is why they've sought to try and destroy Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities. I mean, these have been 3 targeted strikes on 3 nuclear research and enrichment facilities. But the United Nations has been calling for calm, hasn't it? And we've heard from Secretary General Antonio Guterres when he has called for a de-escalation here. I'm being told Iran is also calling for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. So I think the UN certainly has a big role to play in all of this, but right now it does feel like they have been sidelined, particularly by Israel and the United States, rather, who doesn't seem to be adhering to those calls for de-escalation, but also Iran somewhat too. I mean, Iran is firing off missiles indiscriminately into civilian areas, which of course is also a breach of international law. So I think the UN certainly needs to have a stronger voice in all of this, but whether the parties are going to listen, we'll have to wait and see.
Right, and we've heard from the UN, as you've just mentioned, but also let's hear from the international community in general. How is it reacting to all of this?
Well, I'm interested to see how much of the international community reacts, because certainly we know a number of countries, particularly in the Middle East, have been very strong and very firm at criticising Israel for its actions over the past 10 days. But one wonders whether those same countries now will come out strongly and criticise President Trump and the United States. I mean, will the likes of Saudi Arabia or Qatar or the United Arab Emirates have equally strong words for the president? I mean, you would imagine it will be difficult for them because they are close allies of the United States and they likely won't want to absorb or catch his wrath, I suppose you could describe it as. I mean, this is still very fresh. I think what has happened is still being absorbed here in terms of people's minds and understanding where to from here. But certainly I think right now the focus is on trying to de-escalate the situation and avoid potentially the Iranians targeting the Americans, because if that happens, I think then, you know, as we heard there in that clip we were saying, the US is prepared to keep going back and to attack again. They say they've got lists of other targets, and there's some reporting here that the Americans had sent a back-channel message to the Iranians before this saying that this is the limit of their strikes. They are just going to hit those 3 facilities, but if they respond by attacking US soldiers, then other targets will grow onto their list, and we could see yet more American airstrikes. And once again, then that cycle of violence will then just continue to escalate, and we really are into uncharted territory in terms of a major war between the US, Israel and Iran.
And here's the thing, US President Donald Trump saying it is now time to talk. Rather interesting timing after all that has happened.
Well, I think, you know, the president has shown that he likes to have a tough negotiating style, doesn't he? Perhaps the thinking in the White House is, and I'm just, you know, guessing here, but perhaps the thinking is that by bringing Iran back to the negotiating table from a weakened position, that they may be willing to strike a deal by sending a signal that this is just about the nuclear program, not about regime change. That the Ayatollah may be willing to sign a new arrangement with the United States in order to bring this thing to a close. I mean, we had heard earlier in the week the president say they knew where the Ayatollah is hiding out in his underground bunker, and they said he is safe for now and that they're not going to target him. I think that's sending a signal that they aren't looking for an uprising or a major regime change in Iran, but maybe they're holding that out as a negotiating tool. You know, I guess we'll have to wait and see how the Iranians respond to that. Will they be strong-armed into coming to the negotiating table after absorbing such a heavy hit from the Americans and the Israelis as well? Or will it just embolden them to fight further on and to go to war completely? Very uncertain. And I don't think anybody really knows the answer right now.
Right, we wait and see indeed. Trent Murray is SABC News correspondent out in Tel Aviv for us. Thanks very much indeed for that update.